Week 15 of the 2020 college football season is done, and we are headed into Week 16, which is the final week of the regular season for all teams. And this is also the final week of games for all the teams that will not be participating in bowl games, as well as conference championship weeks. This is going to be a very impactful week and possibly the most important week of the season for pretty much every team in college football right now. So this is going to be a pretty big week coming up in Week 16. And we're going to be going over our rankings as we always do. And we're going to be starting out with 1 through 7, which we did not see a lot of teams in the top 10, let alone in the top 25 play this week. Especially, we only had one team out of the top 7 play in Week 15, and that's due to a lot of cancellations, which a couple of teams, especially the ACC teams here, had bye weeks. But as far as it goes for Ohio State, Texas A&M, Cincinnati, Indiana, they all had games canceled. Like I think Ohio State was supposed to play Michigan, Texas A&M. All these teams did not have games this week, which could be a little bit concerning, which for Ohio State, good thing for them is that they're still able to compete in the Big Ten Championship, because if they were not able to, that would easily cut them out of the race for the college football playoff, in which, there are a lot of arguments going around right now that a 5-0 Ohio State team or a 6-0 Ohio State team, if they do win the Big Ten Championship, would be in the college football playoff or not, which, I think Ohio State, they've easily passed the eye test here. They've blown out pretty much all of their opponents. And especially if they have a good showing in the Big Ten Championship, I think Ohio State should be granted an opportunity in the college football playoff, mainly because of how talented they are as a whole. If you look at Ohio State right now, they got Justin Fields, who's arguably going to be the Heisman this season, and possibly he could be in the race for the first round draft pick next season. So, when you've got as good of a team as Ohio State is, you can't just leave them out of the college football playoff here. But as for the team that did play this week in the top 7, Alabama, they're easily the most dominant team in the nation right now. Like, if you're talking about a national champion right now, this may be one of the more predictable seasons of all time, because Alabama's been so much more dominant than every other team in this top 7 here. And I'm saying, there have been a lot of things that have been unpredictable this season. There's no doubt about that. But the national champion may be the one exception to that, because, Alabama, if they do win a national championship, this may be one of the more dominant teams we've seen in recent history, mainly because, they're 10-0. They've won up all 10 of their opponents, and they've had some major wins in through there. Arkansas did not even stand a chance. 52-3 was the final score there. And I understand that Arkansas is kind of on a bad losing streak right now, but this is a team that's actually been halfway decent this season. So, for Arkansas to get blown out as much as they did, it was a pretty brutal loss for them. As for Notre Dame, they're number 2 this week. Once again, they're going to stay in that position, but they've got a big showdown coming up this weekend against Clemson. Notre Dame and Clemson have got a rematch coming up this Saturday in the ACC Championship. That's going to make for quite a game right there between both those teams. I think, honestly, in that situation right now, if Clemson ends up winning that game, we're going to see both Notre Dame and Clemson in the college football playoff is what I'm thinking right now. But if you think about it, if Notre Dame wins that game, Clemson's knocked out of the college football playoff, and that opens the door wide open for either Texas A&M or Cincinnati to sneak in there, which, honestly, I think Cincinnati kind of deserves a chance at a college football playoff, mainly because they've been the best Group of 5 team we've probably ever seen in the college football playoff era, or in recent memory for that matter. So that's gonna be really interesting to see what happens there if Clemson does lose. But if you think about it, what if Clemson and Ohio State both lose in the Big Ten Championship? That probably puts, it does allow Texas A&M and Cincinnati both to go in. So this is a crucial week for all of these teams building up. It's one and done for especially Ohio State and Clemson right now. And in a season that's been as unpredictable as it has been, who knows what can happen there? Alabama's pretty predictable. I'm pretty sure we all know that they've got a really good chance to win the SEC championship, but it's just everything else is really unpredictable right now. Finally, we got Texas A&M. They're 7-1, and they're going to stay at the 5 position this week. Cincinnati moved up to number 6 after Florida getting upset last night, and Cincinnati is 8-0 right now. We also got Indiana coming into the top 7 as a 6-1 team. They're moving up 2 this week, as even though they did not play a game, they're moving up ahead of Miami and Florida, who both got upset this week. That was crazy to see. Miami and Florida, I predicted to both be facing each other in the Orange Bowl. That's definitely going to be changing as we head into Week 16. Here's your 8 through 14. We got Iowa State coming in at number 8. They did not play this week, but they're going to be in the Big 12 Championship, so we'll be able to see whether Iowa State's for real or not. But they're 8-2 right now, and they're moving up 2. Georgia had a blowout win over Missouri, 49-14. Very good win there for Georgia, and Georgia's looking really good right now. I think Georgia's honestly looking better than a Florida team, which Florida, they did beat Georgia earlier on in the season, but I think right now, especially after Florida getting upset last night, Georgia looks like the better team between Georgia and Florida. It's just, I mean, it's just as straight up as that. I mean, they've got JT Daniels, who's absolutely balling out right now, 49-14. And let me remind you, Missouri's a good team right now. They were ranked last week, so I mean that was a very good win for the Bulldogs. They're 7-2 right now. As for Oklahoma, they're the 10th ranked team in the nation, and they had a bye week as well. They did not play, and they're moving up 2. They're 8-2. Florida's moving down 5 positions to number 11 this week, and I don't think that they're deserving of being behind Northwestern and Iowa quite yet. I mean, I definitely considered it, but I mean, Florida still has Kyle Trask, which Kyle Trask I think is a top 2, top 3 quarterback in the nation, which last night he didn't have his best game, but I mean, if you look at the rest of the season for Kyle Trask, he's been on fire this season. Like, it's been an insanely good season out of Kyle Trask, and I mean, yeah, you got to really watch out for him, and I think Florida's still got potential to make it to a good bowl game. It's just a matter of how they finish up here. But Florida, they lost to LSU 34-37 last night, as you guys all know. Pretty tough loss there for Florida. Northwestern's going up to number 12 after beating Illinois 28-10, which Illinois has been kind of a sneaky team this season. And of course, Northwestern's definitely the better team, and they won that one as they should have. But they're 6-1 right now. Iowa's going to be number 13. And honestly, between Iowa and Northwestern, I'd probably say Iowa's looking slightly better. But Northwestern did beat Iowa earlier on in the season, so you can't really put Iowa ahead of Northwestern in that situation. Plus, the Hawkeyes are a 2-loss team. But, I mean, they've won 6 straight. Like, they lost their first 2 games, and they've won 6 straight. Iowa's definitely a team that I think is capable of playing in a pretty good bowl game as we head on towards bowl season. But 14 is going to be USC, and they had a close win in a nail-biter over UCLA. 43-38 was the final score there. They're going to stay at their position at 14 this week. They're 5-0. So they're undefeated. They're 5-0. So I mean, you could argue that they should be ahead of all these other teams. But I mean, they did not look completely perfect last night against UCLA. I mean, UCLA is a good team, but that game was way too close for comfort in order to put them ahead of all the other teams on this list here. Like 8 through 14, honestly, could go in any order possible. Like, you could easily put Iowa at number 10 or number 9 if you really wanted to. But like, I mean, this is a pretty jumbled up section of teams here between 8 and 14. All these teams are very close in skill level right now, I would say. Moving on to 15 through 21, I got North Carolina coming in at 15, and this may surprise a few of you guys as to how low you may think North Carolina is, but this is a 3-loss team still. Like, North Carolina's lost 3 games, and I just don't think it's worthy enough to put them, even though they had an insanely good win over Miami yesterday. I just don't think a 3-loss team is worthy of being anywhere past 15 right now, but they did beat Miami 63-28. North Carolina's been a very interesting team all season long. I mean, this is a team that gets blown out one week, takes one terrible loss one week, and then they managed to absolutely destroy Miami, which Miami's looking like, or they were looking like, one of the best teams in the nation prior to the game yesterday. So that was a huge surprise loss there out of Miami, and especially in the fashion that it happened. I mean, that really surprised me as well. But Miami, they're coming in at 16, just behind North Carolina. They're moving down 9 positions this week, and once again, they took that terrible loss, 20-63 to North Carolina. They're 8-2. Coastal Carolina looked really sloppy yesterday against Troy, so I moved them down 4 positions. I just don't think that they should be worthy of being 13 after a 4-point win over Troy. Like, I understand they beat BYU, but like, Troy, like any team ahead of Coastal Carolina right now could beat Troy by at least 20 to 30 points. Coastal Carolina looked pretty poor in that game. I mean, I understand that they played really well against BYU, but even BYU struggled against San Diego State last night. So both of those teams are just really polarizing right now. I think both teams probably aren't really worthy of being a New Year's Six bowl bid at this point, but both teams are still good. Like, there's no doubt about that. Coastal Carolina's 11-0. They're still undefeated, but I just don't think that they're worthy of being a top 15 when your strength of schedule is as bad as it is and you put up a sloppy performance against Troy. I just don't think it's worthy of being in the top 15. But BYU, they still won 28-14, but they're moving down 1 position in favor of North Carolina. They're 10-1. Louisiana's coming in at 19. They're 9-1. They're staying at the same position as well, as they did not play this past week. And then we got Texas coming in at 20. They also did not play this week, but they're moving up 2 positions to number 20, and they're a 6-3 team. Oklahoma State is also a 3-loss team, but they had a blowout win over Baylor previously. 42-3 was the final score there. Good win for Oklahoma State. I mean, Oklahoma State's been a very questionable team over the past few weeks, but that was a pretty convincing win out of Oklahoma State last night. They looked pretty good in that matchup. I mean, I think they're worthy of moving up a couple of positions there. Moving on to 22 through 25, we got Tulsa, Liberty, NC State, and Buffalo in that order. We got Tulsa coming in at 22. They're moving down one position on their week off. They had their game canceled, and then they were 6-1 as well coming into this week. Liberty's 23 this week, and they're staying in the same position. They're 9-1 right now, so I honestly think Liberty is still a pretty good team, but their strength of schedule is once again pretty low. NC State's coming in at number 24. And they did not play this week, but they're 8-3 and not really looking like a terrible team. So I decided to put them in the rankings this week. And Buffalo is also joining the rankings at 25. They did blow out win over Akron. 56-7 was the final score there. And they're undefeated at 5-0. So we got two teams entering this week with NC State and Buffalo. Two teams dropped out, Colorado and Wisconsin, which that was a terrible loss for Colorado. I mean, I honestly kind of was hoping Colorado would win that game against Utah yesterday, because that would mean we'd probably see Colorado in the Pac-12 championship game, which would be a crazy occurrence there if it did happen. But it ended up not. Colorado took a loss, and that probably puts up USC to be in the Pac-12 championship game. But I mean, still, Colorado's having a good season. There's no doubt on that. I mean, they're a one-loss team heading into the final week of the regular season. So yeah, it hasn't been too bad of a season for Colorado up to this point. Wisconsin's number 25, or they dropped out from 25 this past week, as they're now 2-3. First five out, we got San Jose State coming in at 26. Colorado is still in the first five out at 27. We got Auburn at 28, Boise State at 29, and then UCF is just edging that 30 spot right at the end of our first five out. But in the end, that wraps up our college football rankings for Week 16. Let me know your thoughts and comments below on these rankings. Let me know if you do anything differently. Once again, we got lots of previews coming up for you guys this week, as well as a new type of content coming up pretty soon. We'll be releasing some of those videos tomorrow. You'll be able to see what those are in the coming days. But then again, I appreciate you guys all sticking around and watching. If you enjoyed this rankings, slap a like on it, subscribe as well. As it really helps with the channel, I'd really appreciate that. But once again, thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you all later.